Hello, my name is Jonathan Burrows and I'm going to talk through this short video introducing the Stockport Safeguarding Adults Partnership. Four big things we're going to be covering off today. We're going to talk about who the Safeguarding Adults Partnership is. We're going to explore what a Safeguarding Adults Review is. I'm going to share a summary of learning from some recent Safeguarding Adult reviews that we've done. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how this affects your role today. So first off, what is the Stockport Safeguarding Adults Partnership? Some of you may be aware of that term before, and for some of you, this will be the first time you're hearing of the Stockport Safeguarding Adults Partnership. It basically does what the name suggests. We work in Stockport, we have a focus on safeguarding adults, and we are a partnership of lots of different organisations. The main partners that we work with are shown on the screen there, so the local authority, fire and rescue, police, Stockport NHS Foundation Trust, Healthwatch, Pennine Care, Stockport Homes. We work with all of the partners who work in Stockport who have a role in safeguarding vulnerable adults from abuse or neglect. And our role in the partnership is to make sure that all of the relationships and the connections between the different services are there, they're supportive, and they're having a positive impact for the adults who need to use any frontline services in Stockport. We do work with the voluntary sector, and we do other pieces of work with different partners depending on the type of project or the type of work that we are doing. The Stockport Safeguarding Adults Partnership came about in 2014 along with every other local authority area in England at the same time. When the Care Act came out, we all had to set up what are known nationally as Safeguarding Adults Boards, and that is a term that you'll hear more nationally if you were to search for this on the internet. The Care Act set out the statutory responsibility that we have to work with our partners, and that need to bring together a range of organisations to collectively look at adult safeguarding across Stockport. Locally in Stockport, we made a very active decision to refer to ourselves as the partnership rather than the board. And one of the reasons for that is we have a very active partnership and we have some very engaging members within that. We don't come together 4 times a year to have board meetings, but it's a daily, it's a routine, it's a regular partnership relationship that we have. So we very deliberately call ourselves the Safeguarding Partnership. So what is it that we actually do? The Care Act sets out our 3 statutory functions, which are on the left of the screen there. We have to develop what's called a business plan, and that really sets out what our priorities are going to be over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and beyond. The Care Act then also says we have to produce an annual report, and as the name suggests, we write every year to describe and analyse ourselves how well we did against delivering on those priorities. And the third and final statutory function that we have is to complete what's called Safeguarding Adults Reviews, and they are about learning for the future, improving services for adults to access. But in reality, on a day-to-day basis, what does that look like? What does that mean in practice? So we deliver and we coordinate and we facilitate lots of multi-agency training. Some of you in the room may have attended some of our training sessions before. Some of you may not be aware of the types of training that we offer. We write and we launch and we deliver lots of different policies and procedures to make sure that we've got the right tools and the right frameworks in place for practitioners. We look at lots of audits and data, and we maintain those relationships across the partnership to make sure that all of our partners and members are working together. Where we need to do a specific piece of learning, or we think something can be improved, we'll have very specific scrutiny exercises, audits, deep dives, whatever we're going to call them. We look at a very specific area of safeguarding practice to see what we can learn to improve for the future. And once we've got that, we need to celebrate what we've done. We need to celebrate and share that learning and that best practice and really build on what we do well and celebrate what happens at a great level across the borough on a daily basis. I mentioned we have a business plan. These are our current priorities. We share them with the Children's Partnership. So we have 3 priorities that are shared between the two. So the first one looks at how we improve partnership working and information sharing. The second one that we want to jointly address with colleagues and Children's is how we work on effective transitions from childhood to adulthood. So when a young person has their 18th birthday, how do we make sure that they're still safeguarded in an adult realm? Any issues, any risks, any exploitation that they may have been experiencing doesn't disappear because they're now 18. So how do we work with adult services to make sure that that works as seamlessly and as safely as possible? And the final priority looks at how we understand complex trauma and how we assess risk. The Children's Partnership has their own priority, which looks at how they work with men. So whether that's dads in family networks, uncles, stepfathers, brothers, whatever, how we work with men and how we make sure that we've got that safe factor for them. And in the adults world, we have our own priority around how we work with adults to manage risk effectively and make safeguarding personal. And I hope that idea of making safeguarding personal isn't something that you're unfamiliar with. For some of you, it may be the first time you're hearing about that, but that is essentially how do we make sure that that individual that we are working with is at the heart and at the center of whatever we are doing. So how do we know that we're making a difference? How do we measure ourselves? How do we make sure that whatever learning, whatever improvements, whatever we are working on is having a positive impact for the people of Stockport? How do we make our work meaningful? There are a number of ways that we can do this. The first and perhaps the most obvious is by completing audits. We try and run quarterly audits in the Safeguarding Partnership, and that is done on a particular theme. We come together with practitioners, with leaders, with managers, and we look at a case-by-case basis, or we look at thematic policies and procedures, but we make sure that we understand the difference that we're making. And to back that up, we look at lots of performance data. We look at lots of numbers and statistics to really understand what that feels like, what that system-wide offer is, and how many adults we're working with, in what way that we're working with them, and what outcomes that we're achieving. And that tells us a great deal, but it tells us one half of the story. And the other half comes from individuals themselves. So we go out and we speak to adults with lived experience of our services. We speak to practitioners across our partner organisations. And we hear back from our members, our partners, to see what engagement they've done. How are they capturing those adults' voices? How are they understanding what's happening from a lived experience perspective? And how can we learn and share from that? That all comes together, and in the annual report that we write once a year, we reflect that back and we analyse and really take an inward look at ourselves in the partnership to understand what difference we've made and what we need to do different for next year. And obviously that's reported. We have our quarterly board meetings, so we make sure we've got all those reports coming through and we're sharing and we're very transparent and we understand with our partners what difference we're making. I mentioned earlier on at the start of this video that we're going to talk about safeguarding adults reviews. Again, this may be a term some of you are familiar with, and this might be the first time that some of you are hearing of a safeguarding adult review, or a SAR, SAR. We call them SARs for short. So what is a safeguarding adults review? A safeguarding adults review again does what it says. It is a review of an adult who has been through a safeguarding process. And we do this to learn. We never do one of these reviews to blame or to find fault. We always do it with a heavy emphasis on learning. They're very interactive processes from start to finish. So because we want to learn as much as possible about a particular incident or a pathway or a process, we talk to lots of different people. We engage and we include as many people as we can to make sure that we're not missing out on any learning there. We don't complete these in isolation. We don't complete it behind closed doors. We want to make sure we involve as many people as possible. Managers, leaders, practitioners, people on the front line, And then individuals themselves, if they're alive, we'll talk to them, we'll talk to their family network, their employers, their neighbours, their carers, anyone that can give us an insight into that process. Once we've completed the review, we have to publish it. And whenever we publish a review, we always anonymize it. And later on in the video, I'm going to talk about two individuals, and I'm not going to use their real names. And the reason for that is because we want to respect their identity. We want to remove any personally identifiable information. And the reason that we do that is because we want to focus on the learning. So we don't want anyone to look at one of these reviews and recognize who we're talking about. And that takes away from the focus of being on learning, because there'll be a recognition and a memory of what happened there. But we also want to protect the professionals that were involved in that case. For the same reason, we don't want anyone to feel blamed or at fault or anything like that. So we anonymize it to make sure that we talk about Josie or Martin or social worker 3 or district nurse X, to make sure that we're always looking at the positives and looking at the learning aspect. And once we've completed these reviews, we include a summary of our learning and our findings and recommendations for how we can improve our services to prevent similar issues from reoccurring. We publish our reports on our website, and then we go back through that cycle of testing them through audits and performance data to make sure that where we are putting learning into place, it's making a difference, it's embedded, and that people are experiencing improved services because of that. There are 3 instances when we would do one of these reviews, and these are the 3 questions that we would ask ourselves. And if you can answer yes to any one of these questions, then we might potentially need to think about doing a safeguarding adults review. So the first scenario looks at whether an adult has died as a result of abuse or neglect, and there was concern that partner agencies could have worked more effectively to protect the individual. The second is where there's an adult who is still alive, but they've experienced serious abuse or neglect, and they would have been likely to have died had it not been for a particular intervention. And the third scenario is where an individual has suffered permanent harm or has reduced capacity or quality of life, whether because of physical or psychological effects, as a result of abuse or neglect. So we're always dealing with an adult with care and support needs, and it doesn't matter if there's an active care plan from the local authority to address those. We're always looking at an experience of serious abuse or neglect, and we're always looking at where we think that multi-agency working could have been stronger. And if we can answer yes to any one of those questions, we need to think about doing a safeguarding adults review. The full criteria for one of these reviews is set out under Section 44 of the Care Act. It's on screen there. I'm not going to read it through in full detail if anyone wants to go and research it. Section 44 of the Care Act, and that will bring it up. It talks about the conditions there, and that's those 3 questions that we had on the previous slide there. So condition 1 is where an adult has died, and we know or suspect it results from abuse or neglect. And condition 2 is where the adult is still alive, but we know or suspect they've experienced serious abuse or neglect. I want to spend just 2 minutes talking through a couple of safeguarding adult reviews that were recently completed in Stockport, and I want to share a bit of a health warning now. So if anyone doesn't want to hear about these reviews, they are sadly individuals that have died, we can pause the tape and you can take some space. But I would like to share their learning with you all. So the first person I want to talk about is Josie. Like I mentioned before, Josie isn't her real name. Josie was 76 years old when she died. She lived in a residential care home, and she'd been diagnosed with mixed Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. Josie developed a moisture lesion which developed into an ungradable pressure ulcer. At the time of her death, her needs were being met by both residential care home staff and the district nursing team. And her deteriorating condition raised concern amongst all professionals involved in Josie's care. So to give you a bit of a timeline for Josie, in month 1, she moved from one care home to another. By month 2, she started to develop those moisture lesions, and by month 6, that was a grade 2 pressure ulcer. By month 8, that pressure sore was ungradable, and because of the concern amongst professionals, a safeguarding referral was made to the local authority and a strategy meeting was held. Sadly, a month after that, Josie passed away. 5 months after that, the coroner held an inquest, and 2 months after that, we got involved and we completed our safeguarding adults review. So as you can see there, we always do one of these reviews after the fact to look at learning. We don't do these as part of active care planning, but we do these afterwards to really focus on that learning and that improvement. So the main learning points from Josie's review are on the screen here. We learned that the handover of care when Josie moved between care homes could have been more coordinated. That information sharing could have been stronger between everyone involved. And because of that, we wanted to explore how we could make that better. So what updated policies and procedures can we support to develop for professional visits into care homes to really support that effective and that timely and that easy information sharing and communication. We also learned the importance of professionals coming together and working together to address and escalate concerns before going to the local authority to raise a safeguarding concern. In Josie's case, that happened, and it was right to hold a safeguarding strategy meeting to bring everyone together to collect that information. But unfortunately for Josie, that process wasn't fully explained and it wasn't fully understood by her son. So sadly, Josie's family were told that there was a safeguarding process taking place, and they understood that to mean that someone was abusing and neglecting Josie in the care home, which absolutely was not the case. So one of the things that we learned because of that is how important that communication is with family to make them understand what a safeguarding process is and what it isn't. And particularly in Josie's case, where she couldn't advocate for herself, that's even more important. So we're doing some work, and we've got easy read safeguarding leaflets that explain that process for anyone to understand what that process is going to look like, what it's going to feel like, and what it's going to achieve. And once that process is happening, it was really important in Josie's case for the local authority and everyone involved to rely on that clinical expertise and knowledge around how to address pressure ulcers, making sure that we've got the right people involved in those processes from the earliest opportunity. The next person I want to talk about is Martin. Martin was 49 years old when he died. He enjoyed travelling, going on holiday with his family, going to live music events and aeroplanes. Martin had a physical and a learning disability, and he experienced global developmental delay when he was growing up. He was the eldest of 4 siblings, and he lived in his own tenancy with support from services. When Martin was referred in to us after his death, we learned that he was known to adult social care, Pennine Care, his GP, Stockport Homes Independent Living Team, Stockport NHS Foundation Trust, and his home care provider. We know that he was consuming excessive amounts of alcohol throughout his adult life, and in fact there was bottles and cans stacked up to the ceiling inside his home. Martin wouldn't always let professionals into his home, and because he was deemed to have capacity, information wasn't always shared with his family. Towards the end of Martin's life, he experienced a decline in his mobility and a rapid decline in his physical health in the 3 months before his death. Martin sadly died of decompensated alcoholic fatty liver disease, but because information wasn't shared with his family because he was deemed to have capacity, his parents were unaware of his physical diagnosis and how diseased his liver was. So what did we learn from this review? We celebrated the good practice, and that included interventions from Adult Social Care and Stockport NHS Foundation Trust to rapidly put support in place at the end of Martin's life. And we also celebrated the fact that Martin led a relatively independent life. He needed support to maintain his tenancy. His family provided a great deal of support, and he had providers that went in to care for him. But he was still independent. He could make his way to Manchester Airport and watch the planes taking off and landing, and he could do that for hours at a time. Sadly, there were some missed opportunities in Martin's case. One of those was there was no formal Section 42 safeguarding process initiated in response to his self-neglect, and this led to gaps in information sharing. There were some issues around how health staff were able to access Martin's hospital passports in previous hospital episodes before his death. Where Martin wouldn't let people into his home, there were failed home visits, but they weren't always followed through or escalated. We didn't always see that professional curiosity and that information sharing between professionals where Martin wouldn't let you into his flat. Because of the decline in Martin's physical health, some of our local end-of-life services were not fully utilised due to the time frame regarding his death. Martin came to notice a number of services during the COVID-19 pandemic, and some of his support was suspended during that period, and we didn't know fully the impact until much later on that was having on Martin. There were some clear signs of severe alcohol usage that weren't raised by services and therefore weren't addressed. And as I mentioned before, Martin's family were not fully included in his care planning. So he had some very specific learning in this case around how to work with adults who either have or don't have capacity when they are self-neglecting. So from Martin's review, there were 5 broad learning points that came out. So the first one was that not all agencies working in the partnership are aware of the different services available to support adults with learning disabilities. We felt there was an opportunity for leaders and practitioners to raise awareness of support and system and referral pathways across Stockport. The second was that agencies working with adults with a learning disability should review processes for maintaining hospital passports to ensure all partners are included in ratifying documents and all pertinent information for the individual is recorded and is available. The third, professionals should consider how to engage with wider family networks in care planning when working with adults with learning disabilities. Learning point 4, where concerns regarding self-neglect are referred to the local authority, these should be managed internally under a Section 42 process to facilitate multi-agency working and information sharing to the point of an initial multi-agency protection plan being implemented. And the final point, we asked ourselves, how can systems work together to identify adults with additional vulnerabilities who do not consistently allow professionals into their homes, including escalating those concerns where appropriate. So we've talked about Josie and Martin. We've talked about the learning that we gained. What happens after a review? How do we make sure that we're embedding that learning and we're making it real? We do a number of things in the partnership because we don't see the process as ending with those learning points. So we can design, develop and deliver multi-agency training. We can update processes, procedures and policies. And we can look at referral pathways and thresholds to see if there are processes that can be made easier and more streamlined. We hold annual conferences. This is a photo or a number of photos from our annual Domestic Abuse and Safeguarding Conference in November 2023. And we try and get as many people in the room to share that learning and talk about what we're doing, talk about changes that we're making and how we can make that learning real. We also develop what we call 7-minute briefings. This is the 7-minute briefing for Martin. The idea is it should take you no more than 7 minutes to read the review, who Martin is, why we did the review, what we learned, what we changed as a result, and then where to find more information there. You can find Martin's and Josie's and a number of other 7-minute briefings on our website on the right hand side there, www.stockport.gov.uk/SSAP. So more importantly, bringing all of this together, what does this mean for your role? What does this mean in practice? So I just want to leave 5 questions on the screen there with you all before we end the video. So do you know who the safeguarding team is at the trust? Do you know how to contact them? Do you know where to find policies and procedures? Can you spot the signs of potential safeguarding concerns? And if you do, would you know who to speak with about them? I want to thank you for bearing with me while we talk through this video today. I hope you found it useful. If you want any more information, you can visit our website, www.stockport.gov.uk/SSAP. Thank you.